Two of the fantasy football season, and here's a few tight ends I would bench this week. The first guy, Irv Smith Jr. of the Minnesota Vikings. Irv Smith Jr. had the old goose egg in week 1 here, and this is the funny thing about this Minnesota Viking offense. Last season, there were games where Tyler Conklin had good games and then games where he would disappear. It just depends what happens with Kirk Cousins, because obviously the tight end's the 4th or 5th option on this offense. Irv Smith, he's a great talent, but so far we just haven't seen it in his young career. I know last season he was out with injury. I know he's trying to get back to form here, and he's got a decent matchup on paper versus the Philadelphia Eagles, but right here in week 1, he didn't have anything going versus the Green Bay Packers. And here in week 2, I just can't trust a guy after coming off a goose egg and 2 targets. I don't care who it is. If a guy's struggling, not getting the job done, even though it's only week 2, these fantasy seasons go by quick. And if you're 0-1 already, you can't trust starting a guy like Irv Smith who had 2 targets. I'm not saying to drop him yet, but right now, after not doing anything in week 1, he's easily a tight end I will bench this week. The next tight end is Mike Gesicki of the Miami Dolphins. So I thought Gesicki would be a decent option in week 1. But another guy like Irv Smith Jr., you can't waste any time, and you can't go out there and start him this week here. He's got a tougher matchup versus Baltimore. I thought versus the Patriots, he could at least get 50 or 60 yards. But in that one, only 1 catch for 1 yard on 1 target. And right now, the Dolphins are shying away from him and going more of the receiver route and the running back game, catching out of the backfield. So right here, he's an easy guy not to start this week. But he's a guy to keep an eye on still. I wouldn't drop him just yet. But if he has another poor performance, then he's a tight end we could talk about dropping this week. So Mike Gesicki, after pretty much having a goose egg and not seeing a lot of snaps in week 1 here, he's easily a tight end I will bench in week 2 with just no volume, with just no targets going his way. And obviously a tougher matchup versus Baltimore. And the third and final tight end I will bench this week is Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears. So a lot of hype coming into the season about Cole Kmet, but I wasn't that big into Cole Kmet coming into the season. And another guy in week 1 where how could you trust him? I know it was week 1. I know it was a rainy ball game and it was soaked over there in Soldier Field, but only 1 target in that one. In week 2, he's got a pretty tough matchup at the Green Bay Packers. It obviously shut down Irv Smith Jr. in week 1 where he only had 2 targets. So right here with a tough matchup, not a great quarterback in Justin Fields, and a lack of production in week 1. I could see this happening a lot this season here with Cole Kmet, where he has 1 good game and then a game he don't show up, and he's just a guy I don't want to deal with. If you don't have a quarterback that could get your tight end or receivers the ball, but if you got a quarterback and if you're a wide receiver or a tight end who don't have a quarterback that's going to get you the ball, will be consistent week in and week out, it's going to be tough for you to have the year-long fantasy value. So after coming off a bad week 1 and with the tough matchup here at the Green Bay Packers on Sunday Night Football, Cole Kmet's a tight end I would shy away from. And there's better guys I would start over him this week. A TJ Hawkinson, even a Gerald Everett off the waiver wire. Hey, even a Robert Tonyan in this ball game, I think could have a better ball game than a Cole Kmet. So that's a few tight ends I will bench here for week 2 of the fantasy football season.